Picture yourself as a hunter-gatherer living 13,000 years ago. There are no grocery stores, refrigerators, or food delivery apps. You live in a cave in a region that will eventually become Israel, surrounded by people you genuinely enjoy, which, honestly, may be rarer today than it was back then. You have spent the entire day walking. Your feet are sore, but at least expensive designer shoes have not been invented yet, which may be the only real advantage your life has over modern society. Then one day, someone in your group notices grain that has been left sitting in a damp stone mortar for a little too long. It smells unusual. Bubbles have formed on the surface. Something strange and biological has clearly taken place. Naturally, every survival instinct should tell you not to drink it, but someone does anyway. That person may have been one of the most influential humans who ever lived. That accidental discovery, or perhaps one astonishing moment of reckless curiosity, may have pushed humanity toward changes that shaped nearly every part of civilization. Not only celebrations, not only family members becoming unusually emotional after a second glass of wine, nearly everything. Agriculture, religion, writing, organized communities, and the entire structure of human social life. So, when did ancient people first begin drinking alcohol? More importantly, why did they start? The answer reaches much further into the past than you might expect. And the story does not begin with humans. It begins with monkeys. But wait, right now you might be drinking, thinking about drinking, or remembering the last time you had a beer, a glass of wine, or something stronger. You probably drank it without thinking much about where it came from. But raising a glass is one of the oldest things a human being can do. It is older than writing, older than farming. In fact, our relationship with alcohol may be older than humanity itself. The story begins around 10 million years ago, on a forest floor in Africa, with a small primate reaching for a piece of fruit that had been sitting on the ground for too long. In 2014, UC Berkeley biologist Robert Dudley published a book called The Drunken Monkey. In it, he presented a fascinating evolutionary hypothesis. When ripe fruit falls from a tree and begins to decay, the natural sugars inside it start breaking down. Wild yeast enters the fruit, fermentation begins, and small amounts of ethanol are produced. For fruit-eating primates, the smell of alcohol may have acted like a signal. It meant calories. It meant sugar. It meant food. Researchers have also found evidence that, around 10 million years ago, one of our ancestors developed a greater ability to metabolize ethanol. In other words, our ancestors may not have simply tolerated fermented fruit. Evolution may have made them better at finding and processing it. By the time early humans appeared, our biological relationship with alcohol may already have been millions of years old. But when did humans stop finding alcohol by accident and start making it on purpose? In 2018, archaeologists studying Raqefet Cave near Haifa, Israel, found a possible answer. The cave was used by the Natufians, a group of semi-sedentary hunter-gatherers who lived in the region around 13,000 years ago. Inside the cave, researchers discovered stone mortars carved directly into the bedrock. When they examined the residue left inside them, they found evidence that wheat and barley had been soaked, germinated, processed, and fermented. In other words, the Natufians appear to have been brewing a beer-like drink around 13,000 years ago. That makes it one of the earliest known examples of deliberate alcohol production. What makes the discovery so remarkable is that the Natufians were not full-time farmers. They still relied heavily on hunting, gathering, and collecting wild grain. They did not cultivate barley on an agricultural scale. They gathered it by hand. Yet making a fermented drink was important enough that they developed a process for it before full-scale farming had even begun. For a long time, the traditional story went like this. Humans settled down. They invented farming. They built permanent villages. Then, once civilization was established, they discovered fermentation and began making alcohol. But Raqefet Cave suggests that alcohol may have entered the story much earlier. People were brewing before agriculture had fully developed, and Raqefet was not the only place where feasting and fermentation may have shaped early human society. Around 1,000 years later, someone in southeastern Turkey built something enormous. At Göbekli Tepe, massive stone pillars, some over 10 tons, were arranged in careful circles and carved with animal imagery. It was built before farming, before pottery, before anyone in the region had a permanent home. These were still hunter-gatherers, organizing the labor to quarry, move, and carve multi-ton stone with precision, for reasons archaeologists couldn't explain for years. Then they found large stone vats at the site, and inside them, chemical traces of fermented grain. The leading theory now is that Göbekli Tepe wasn't a home, it was a gathering place. People traveled from across the region for ritual, feasting, and drinking together. And that raises a real possibility. that the demand for these gatherings and the alcohol that came with them is part of what pulled scattered hunter-gatherer groups into cooperation in the first place, which connects to one of archaeology's biggest open questions. Why did humans start farming at all? Archaeobotanist Patrick McGovern, the leading expert on ancient alcohol, has spent decades arguing it wasn't for bread, it was for beer. Bread requires grinding, kneading, baking, a whole process. Beer is simpler. Soak grain in water, walk away, and fermentation does the rest. To McGovern, the desire to drink may have been the stronger motivator. To be clear, this is still debated. Agriculture likely had multiple drivers, including climate shifts and population pressure. But it's a real possibility that alcohol wasn't a reward that showed up after we settled down. It may be one of the reasons we settled down at all. By 7000 BCE, the evidence gets far more precise. At Jiahu, a Neolithic village in central China, archaeologists found pottery jars with residue from a fermented drink made of rice, honey, grapes, and hawthorn berries. This is the oldest confirmed alcohol recipe in the world, and it wasn't crude. It was a deliberate blend of multiple ingredients. Whoever made this knew exactly what they were doing. From there, it only grew. By ancient Egypt, beer wasn't something people made for fun. It was woven into everything. Workers who built the pyramids were paid in beer, several liters a day, as their actual salary. Part of the reason, river water could carry contamination, while the brewing process made beer a more reliable option, though Egyptians still drank water too. On top of that, the grain in it added real calories and nutrients. For a laborer hauling limestone blocks in the desert heat, beer wasn't just a drink, it was lunch. And then there was the religious side. Egyptians believed beer was a gift from Osiris. It showed up in temple offerings, burial rituals, and medical prescriptions. Healers mixed herbs into beer and prescribed it for everything from stomach problems to infections. One single drink was doing the job of a paycheck, a water backup, a meal, a medicine, and a prayer, all from the same cup. So here's the full picture. 10 million years ago, our ancestors were evolving the biology to seek out and process fermented fruit. 13,000 years ago, they were deliberately brewing in caves before they knew how to farm. Around 11,600 years ago, they may have been building the first monuments in human history just to have a place to drink together. 9,000 years ago, they had actual recipes. 5,000 years ago, entire civilizations were running on it. Alcohol probably didn't create civilization by itself, but there's a real possibility it helped pull us there. It may have encouraged cooperation, shaped rituals, and nudged us toward cultivating the very grain we once just gathered. Every time you have a drink, you're continuing something that started before your species had a name for itself. The process changed, the ingredients improved, the cups got fancier. But the impulse is the same one that made a small primate reach for a piece of overripe fruit on a forest floor 10 million years ago. We just learned how to make it on purpose.